I'm going to share some, uh, I sort of say old research. It's really not that old, but it's not like, you know, didn't come out today. But it's by a researcher named, hard name, Csikszentmihalyi is his last name, Dr. Csikszentmihalyi. And you hear him quoted a lot in a lot of the performance literature and in a lot of the positive psychology world because he's not really talking about our misery. He's talking about how we thrive and when do we thrive and under what conditions we thrive. And I thought I'd share a little bit about that with you today. It's it's an area of research a lot of people have touched on in many ways over the decades. But he refers to it as being in the flow. Now, let me explain flow to you. You know, it can be when you're playing cards or Monopoly. It can be when you're out shooting baskets with just a few friends in a pickup game. It could be when you're working on a puzzle. It could be sometime at work. It can be sometime when you're sort of, playing your musical instrument. It can be two lovers staring each other in the eyes walking through the park. You're in the flow when time just disappears. You ever had that experience? Of course, you've had this experience where you're with somebody or you're doing something and you look at your watch and, oh my gosh, where did the time go? Well, where it went was you were not conscious of it because you were fully engaged in the experience where you were. I think this is a taste of heaven. You know, we were not designed to live in this place called time. That's something that came with this whole confusing kind of world that we live in now. We were made for eternity, as Solomon says, that every person is born with eternity in their hearts. We can kind of see it and almost experience it sometimes, but hardly ever when as much as when you're involved in those times where time itself goes away. You're not even aware of it. You go, where did the time go? Well, where it always goes, you just weren't aware of it. Why? Because you were so engaged in what you were doing. And so what Csikszentmihalyi did was he researched this whole thing called flow. And flow is also not only time goes away. I mean, you can do that with some drugs, right? You know, one of the coolest things, I had my fourth one surgery last week or now I'm up to four surgeries in this past year and however many months. But one of the things I always love about surgery, there's a lot to not love, especially the rehab. But one of the things I always love, because I try to like trick it, because I always want to, okay, this time it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And what happens is, they're rolling you in. And I remember the anesthesiologist, when I had my knee replacement, he's, they're about to roll me into the OR and he comes in, he says, all right, I'm going to give you a little something that's going to relax you a little bit. You're going to feel like you maybe had a few drinks or whatever. And, it's going to feel all right. And then we'll get you on in there. So he said, so you feel that? And honestly, I didn't. I said, no, I didn't. I don't really feel anything. And he says, well, here, try this. And literally the next moment, I'm looking up and there's three nurses talking to me saying, okay, let's move your leg over here. And I think, we're about to have surgery. And they said, you did really well. And everything went well. I went, what? We're done? You wake up on the other side. That's flow to the max, right? That's when you are really not aware of time going by because you're so involved in actually being conked out. Like the anesthesiologist told me, I said, how much you gonna charge me to put me to sleep? He says, nothing, that's free. He said, I'm gonna charge you to wake you up. So anyway, that's what they do. They wake you up. And it all went by. Well, some experiences in life like that. What Csikszentmihalyi did was, this is also related to the best performance. Like the people that perform at their highest levels, perform at the highest levels when they're in a state of flow. And the goal is to kind of like, wouldn't it be cool to live life in a state of flow? I remember when I was a competitive golfer, and if you're a golfer, you've heard the phrase, somebody's out there shooting a course record. They go, he's, however many under par. And they go, the guy's unconscious. We even use that phrase, unconscious, because they're really not even conscious of what they're doing because they're not observing it. They're so lost in the experience. And every great round of golf or every great performance, the performer is so into the experience, they have lost awareness of everything else except being in it. I remember when I used to compete, and sometimes, the best rounds, it's like not even aware of what I'm doing, just kind of lost in it, and everything's just perfect. But what you're not doing is you're not evaluating it. Once you start to evaluate how I'm doing, then you're out of the experience. I remember many times, floating around and on the back nine and however many under par, and then you got so many holes left, and you go, "Whoa, I could shoot 63 today. I could break a course record." And as soon as you think that, boom, you've lost it. You hit the next one in the lake because you've left the experience. We know this from people's sexual functioning and in all sorts of performance problems. Like when couples have performance problems, what are they doing? They're evaluating their performance. They're not lost in the experience. And what therapists try to do is get them lost in the experience through various exercises and things where they get back into this state and performance works again. So, what are the conditions under which flow occurs? Well, how about this one? That you've got to be doing something where the dual factors of ability, where I've got enough ability where I'm actually kind of able to do this kind of okay, pretty well. But then there's enough challenge to push me right out of my comfort zone of anything I've ever tried to do before, even though I've got ability in that arena. So it's like somebody signs up for a tournament with better levels of competition than they've ever faced before. They really do have the ability to be there, but it's going to challenge them. It's like a skier being kind of out over their skis. They're going down a hill a little harder than they've ever tried. Now, do they have the ability? Yeah, but it's going to stretch them. And so when we get stretched, this is true in sales. You go for a bigger account than you've ever gone for, or you're just pushing the limit of what you've ever done. And that's really the way I like to think about this. It's not pushing the world record, it's pushing your own personal best a little past what your personal best is. Because if you've got the ability to do your personal best, then with a little improvement and a little challenge, your best can get better. Well, that's the combination of challenge and ability. So whatever you're doing right now and you're able to do, challenge yourself to do a little more, and you'll be a little closer to what we call flow. Then the next one is really, really, really having a lot of focus. We can't be distracted and get into flow. If you and your spouse want to experience flow and you're just even talking together or in your sexual relationship or, whatever it is, you got to be focused on each other. The neuroscience around empathy and kind of when this synchronous and synchrony, what's that word? When we kind of sync up together, when your mirror neurons and all the it's being in sync with the other. When that happens, that requires focus. And if you're not making eye contact and you're not there and you're kind of there but somewhere else, you're not going to go into flow. We got to be 100% engaged in the moment for flow to happen. So it takes focus. That's why to do your best work, you shouldn't be multitasking. You should be immersed in it, in focus. And here's another one. There've got to be clear goals as to knowing what's expected, clear goals of how well you want to do, what you want to hit, but knowing what's expected of you to be able to know how to play the game. One of the groups that and related to that is kind of instant feedback. One of the groups that chicks at me I had studied were the great rock climbers in the world. Very clear goals, and you know what's expected. There's a lot of focused attention to it, but immediate feedback. To be in flow, this is what people that are opposed to feedback don't get. The Bible says over and over and over, the more open we are to feedback, the better we're going to be. Well, what does the science prove? The more immediate the feedback, not only open to it, but immediate the feedback, the better we are. Because think of this, a rock climber, if they slip just a little bit, they immediately know that and they go to correct. So instant feedback. And you got to have a sense of being deeply immersed and that you have control over you. Hard to go into flow when somebody else has control over you. You remember the first time that you learned to drive a car or do something scary like that? I was up in a helicopter, 4 or 5 months ago, and we were flying along and actually over some glaciers and stuff, and I was in a helicopter and I was sitting in the front seat with the pilot, and he said, "Do you want to fly it?" And I've flown airplanes, but I've never flown a helicopter. Helicopters way more whatever the word would be, complicated, scary. I mean, nuanced, because you got all fours going. And so he gave me the yoke and told me, he said, "All right, you do this, and you look at the skyline out there, and you got to have your focus." And I'll never forget, it's total flow, because you feel the control you have immediately. I mean, you move this it just starts to go, and you get in sync, you get in the flow. You got such immediate feedback to when you move the stick, the helicopter's going to do something. Your whole visual field is going to do something. But when you're in it, oh man, time just kind of goes away because of your total engagement. So think about that. Using, I like to refer to the way the Bible talks about it, being wholehearted, having your whole heart in something, in your relationships, in your work, whatever it is, to let yourself be there, not be there and be somewhere else at the same time. God, you talk about how to make your life long and boring, or the afternoon long and boring, then be there and not there. Gosh, I remember when, so many times. I remember I had chemistry, the last period, this is in high school, last period in class before, it was every afternoon, because I was a competitive golfer. Every afternoon, go to the golf course, and our team would have to practice and all that. And, oh my gosh, I'm sitting there in chemistry. When is this class going to end? When am I going to get out of here? And I'm just thinking about getting out of there. I am not in chemistry at all. I'm out on the golf course. And I remember those were the longest classes that I ever had. Why? Because I wasn't engaged. Now, think about this. What if you had given us a little experiment there, and that bigger, you put this in there and that in there, and he's going to, now be careful, because if you put too much in, it's going to explode in your face. Well, now I bet that time would have flown by because you're engaged. So look at what's distracting you out of your relationships and intimacy and connection and practice or whatever. Be wholehearted, have control of what you're doing, clear expectations and goals, get immediate feedback, and use a lot of focus. You'll see whatever work you're doing begin to change. That is flow.